what the haters talking about.
Damn. Order protection.
Very, very sad news on this weekend. We've already lost Dick Gregory, 84 years old, last night. We are now getting word that legendary comedian Jerry Lewis has died. He was 91 years old. Lewis made certainly a big name for himself as part of the comedy team Martin and Lewis, but later on in his career, he adopted that cause of muscular dystrophy. He started the MDA Telethon back in 1952. It, of course, became an annual Labor Day tradition, and that happened in 1966. I know many of us grew up with that, myself included. A statement from the family is saying that he died peacefully this morning with his family by his side, and NBC's Keith Morrison looks back on his life.
This is how most people remember Jerry Lewis. Zany, goofy, non-stop hilarity. He was born Jerome Levitch in Newark, New Jersey. He never finished high school. The business, making people laugh, was all that mattered. Audiences loved him. Here he was, still a teenager, with second billing at the prestigious 500 Club in Atlantic City, which is where Jerry Lewis formed half of one of the hottest comedy teams in history. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, the crooning Casanova and the clown. Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin were literally an overnight sensation. It wasn't long before Hollywood called. They made 17 movies together, all box office hits. Then in 1950, they got their own variety show. Jerry Lewis was only 24 years old. They were making $10 million a year. Their fans couldn't get enough of them. But then, as suddenly as it started, it was over. After 10 rollicking years, Jerry and Dean called it quits. When Martin and Lewis parted, they were no longer friends. And there were rumors that the breakup would end each of the men's careers. Instead, Jerry Lewis went on to sign the biggest deal in Hollywood history, a $10 million contract with Paramount. He made more than 30 movies, solo. Those movies broke new ground. Unlike nearly anyone else at that time, Jerry Lewis had complete control. He not only acted in his films, he wrote them, produced them, directed many of them too. Years later, his movies didn't do so well, and the only place left to see a Jerry Lewis movie was late-night TV. But there was one thing, one huge, long-running act that never seemed to get old. Every Labor Day, the Jerry Lewis Telethon for muscular dystrophy. And long after a legendary career in movies, club acts, and TV, when he was 69, he got going all over again. Debuting on Broadway in the hit musical Damn Yankees. His was a life as big as entertainment, the only thing he ever wanted to do. And did so well, he got the whole world to watch.
Mamma, yo quiero, mamma, yo quiero, mamma, yo quiero, mamma, da chupeta, da chupeta.
And that was Keith Morrison there reporting for us. Jerry Lewis dead at the age of 91 years old. Like so much of the way news travels these days, I first heard about it via Twitter. Penn Jillette, the comedian, tweeted, "Jerry Lewis just died. When I met him, I fell apart, just sobbed. I guess it's time for that again." And comedian Penn Jillette is joining me right now on the phone. And Penn, I'm so glad you're here. I appreciate your calling because granted, this is probably a pretty sad time for you. I know that you met Jerry Lewis back in the 1980s. So talk about your recollections.
Well, you know, Jerry was such a different generation from us. And when I first met him in Montreal at the last comedy festival, you know, I was talking about, I was just kind of blasé, and I was kind of, you know, Jerry, no big deal. He's an old guy, doesn't mean much to us now. I was sitting around talking with the younger comedians. And I was very blasé, didn't mean anything. And then Jerry walked into the room and made eye contact with me. And all of a sudden, all the kind of cool and hip just went away, and I absolutely fell apart, like I would have if I'd met him when I was 10 years old and going to see all his movies. I mean, there's no exaggeration that I completely broke down and sobbed. And after that, I did Politically Incorrect with him. I did The Telethon. He just had a movie that opened last year here in Vegas, and I went to that opening and sat with him. And, I'm exactly the right age that he's everything to me. I mean, he's the comedy movies that my parents took me to, He was just everything. And although there are all sorts of, he was such a wild man and an inspiration in everything he did, and always funny, always funny. I flew an airplane with him, and you'd sit there in the seats, and everybody around you was laughing, just every single moment he was on. And saying that a comedian was always on is often said, in a negative context. But Jerry was just, you would just move with him through a crowd, and everybody around you was laughing. It's so much the way life should be, and life would be different without him. I mean, I know that the title of the movie, King of Comedy, was about Robert De Niro and the character Rupert Pupkin and all of that, and that's kind of ironically, but we've certainly lost the real King of Comedy today.
What do you think is the most important contribution he will have made? And if you can tell me that in about a half a minute, I'd appreciate it.
He was really, 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 really funny. There's nothing else that needs to be said.
His muscular dystrophy telethon, though, I think that was pretty extraordinary. I know I grew up on it. I'm sure you spent time on your Labor Days watching it as well. So this is clearly a man.
Watching it, also being on it. We did it with him.
Which means he must have enjoyed having you around. I think that he probably, in the way you appreciated him when you met him, I'm sure he saw something special in you, Penn, and asked you to come and join him for those magnificent days for which he raised so much money. Penn Jillette, thank you so much. We're so sorry for your loss, as we are for the rest of the country. Again, for all of you, Jerry Lewis dead at the age of 91.
What the haters talking about?
Order in Texas.